Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Today's book review is about a Jewish vampire. The book is called The Blood is the Life by David, I believe it's Carico. This one came recommended to me by my buddy Ryan back when, it was probably like a week or two ago. I posted about uh, a quick perusal of Audible's recommendation page. It's like, oh, would you like to see some fantasy recommendations? I was like, sure. And it's a freaking joke what these recommendations were. Like, out of the top 10, like, most of them were porn. It was it's romantic fantasy. Like, it's porn. It's erotica. It's smut. It's porn. And then, like, randomly, there was a Brandon Sanderson book because he released another one. And, like, of course, it's just selling like hotcakes. And then inexplicably, Dune was in there, and then the rest of it was either lit RPG or lit RPG porn. And I was like, okay, what is this? What is going on? Well, that's what people are buying. It's like, you're Amazon. You're one of the top tech companies in the world. I know you spy on all my buying habits and reading habits and listening habits. Like, I don't care what everybody else is reading. Look at what I'm reading. Recommend accordingly. My word. So I posted about that, and Ryan was one of several people who came back with a recommendation. And this was one book I had not heard of. And I would have been turned off by the fact that it's a vampire book, but it managed to have an intriguing angle, one that I haven't read before. I've read a book that maybe touched on something like this. So back in 2007, when the I Am Legend movie was coming out, I read the book by Richard Matheson, and there's some cheeky quip from him. I can't remember the exact details of it, but he says something like, I don't know why Hollywood is so obsessed with adapting my movie because they've never done it, or adapting my book. And between the I Am Legend and the Omega Man and stuff, there have been a couple of different versions adapting that book, but none of it really all that faithfully. And that includes the Will Smith version, which was great until it ended, and then it just kind of falls apart. But I digress. The point is that it's a very scientific and technical exploration of the vampire gene or germ. I can't remember the exact term for it, but vampirism was a virus that spread, and Robert Neville, the main character, was one of tremendously few people in the world who was immune to this virus. And he happened to be a scientist, and so he was collecting samples and stuff and surviving the way that he has in various iterations of the book, of the movie adaptations. But he was studying it to figure out, like, what are the effects of sunlight? Why does it work this way? What about garlic and whatever else? And if I'm remembering right, if this is the book that I'm thinking of, there was also an instance of him studying the impact of religious symbols. I might be thinking of a different vampire book now. But basically, like, it was predominantly like Christian vampires that had a visceral reaction to the crucifix. But there was also, I want to say, an instance of him encountering a Jewish vampire who had that same response to the Star of David. And that was some data point in his studies. I thought, okay, what are some other things that might be problematic for a Jewish vampire? Well, David Carico explores this in great detail. There are a lot of things that this book does really, really well. There are some other things this book does that I won't say are bad. They are just typical of the kind of book that it is. And me being the high volume reader that I am, I've read a lot of books like this, and that can make it not boring, but it slows down a lot in the middle. There's that muddy middle, but that's got more to do with my reading experience than I think how it might appeal to a general fantasy reader. For that reason, I'm giving it 3 stars, but I expect that the reading public is going to enjoy it a lot more. It's just me. A couple of years ago, when I reread His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, I came up with this term to describe a novel like this. I call it a training camp novel. It's where the writer is introducing the reader to this world that is like ours but slightly different, and by sending the protagonist to what is effectively a training camp, you get to learn all of the different ways that this character's new reality works. His Majesty's Dragon was about a sailor who got switched over to the Air Corps during the Napoleonic Wars, and instead of sailing a ship, and now he gets to captain a dragon. So in The Blood is the Life, we get to follow along this main character. His name is Chaim Khan. He's an Orthodox Jew, and to the extent that I know anything about Judaism, there's the Orthodox wing and the progressive wing, or progressive wings. But the Orthodoxy follows like all of the really old school, very traditional, like what the law of Moses says in the Torah or the Talmud. I know they've got 2 books, and I can't remember which one is like the law book. I believe it's the Torah, but don't quote me on that. There's a lot of books in it that overlap with, or that basically are the Old Testament books that we have in Christendom. In this case, the book of Leviticus, which contains the law of Moses, which has all of the provisions about what they can and cannot eat. Now, in popular culture, people tend to know that practicing Jews don't eat pork or pig products and stuff. I think it's known to a lesser extent that there is a provision against consuming blood specifically. And we in America, we don't generally encounter that all that often. During the time that I lived in Europe, I encountered it with a surprising amount of regularity, including in foods like morcilla, which is a blood sausage. Other parts of Europe will have blood pudding. I think I remember seeing on TV, there are parts of Iceland where they catch puffins and specifically bleed them to store the blood for a food product. So there are obviously parts of the world where this is a normal practice, even to this day, even in the 21st century. And so this law would very much apply to practicing Jews. So when you get a Jew who's been turned into a vampire, well, that presents a problem, especially one who practices orthodoxy. Now, one of the very, very strong things that this book does is right out of the gate, it doesn't waste time like establishing what Chaim Khan's life was like before he got turned. When the book starts, like he has just been turned, and he's waiting in the dark, and he's been a vampire for a couple of weeks maybe, and he approaches a rabbi from a different, I'm going to butcher some of the terminology here, a different temple, a different wing of Judaism, specifically because this guy is from the more liberal and open-minded wing of Judaism. And he's able to tell him what happened. He's like, hey, I was at a nightclub a couple of weeks ago. This girl walked in. I was seduced by her. She took me home. I fell asleep. I woke up. I was like this. And the guy's like, well, as it just so happens, I know a couple of guys who are kind of scholars who deal with weird supernatural stuff. I can put you in contact with them. Chaim Khan gets to meet these 2 guys, and they are both Jewish vampires that are a couple of hundred years old. They're from old Europe and stuff, and they're able to show him some, I believe, again, I know that I'm screwing the terms up on this, like some rabbinic writings, some like actual certified, like this isn't just some Jewish theologian opining and blogging about what the rules should say. Because again, Chaim Khan is Orthodox. These are official authorized documents where there is a plain interpretation that allows for somebody to have to live this way, but still like remain compliant with the laws of his particular flavor of Judaism. So there is, I guess, like a religious, a theological exploration of how that would work for somebody, along with like, okay, well, then let's get into kind of the science of it, the way that Richard Matheson did with I Am Legend. What does this mean for you? What can you do now that you couldn't do before, and vice versa? What is the full range of your limits, of your strength, of your regeneration and stuff? You obviously can't deal with your friends and family the way that you used to. We got to come up with a cover story. They come up with a good one there. I won't spoil it because, again, like the muddy middle might have been muddy for me because I've read a lot of training camp novels and I've read my fair share of vampire books, but this was still very unique for this particular genre of fantasy, and I think you'll probably enjoy it even more than I did, and that's why I'm kind of hyping up the strengths of this one. So from there, like it would be hard to go into too much more detail without giving away the more interesting and compelling ideas in the story. I think one of the best arcs for me to read was when Chaim Khan goes to this place to start training with these other vampires and learning more about his parameters and his limitations. They give him a Krav Maga instructor. And I've only heard a couple of things about Krav Maga. It's specifically an Israeli martial art form, but it's elaborated on in the book as being like the martial art version of English, in that it's a mongrel that borrows from a whole bunch of other things, and it just says, okay, take this particular tactic and dial it up to 11 every time you use it, and you should be fine. So there's a lot of really cool ideas in here, and there more than once I thought about I Am Legend as I was reading it. I thought, okay, it's nice to get something that's still got plenty of action and heroism, but the parts of the book where you stop and you kind of get some didactics or even some exposition, it's still presenting you with ideas that are worth reading, and that you don't mind that, okay, we're going to look at this, we're going to look at your physiology, we're going to look at we're going to come up with ideas about how to cover for your family, about why you're being gone all the time. Like, that stuff was cool. That made it a worthwhile read. I don't know if this is going to be a series. With the way that it ends, it does everything that a good first book could do, in that you're satisfied with what you got, but if they decide to write more, then that's great. So overall, a ringing endorsement of 3 stars, 3.5 for The Blood is the Life by David Carrico. Yeah, I didn't think I would be reading any more vampire books, but this was a good one. This is the kind of thing that freaking Audible should have recommended instead of all that fairy porn. Jeez, I'll be very satisfied when that trend dies out. Blah. Anyway, drive safe. See you out there.